Hey everyone, I'm going to be doing a video on Venus retrograde, in particular this Venus retrograde that we are currently experiencing. So I'm sure you've read bits and pieces about it here and there on the internet or on social media, but I'm just going to do a complete breakdown. I'm going to cover what Venus retrograde means, what it means if you have it in your chart, and what it means of the transit that's happening right now. And I'm also going to point out certain placements that might be more affected by this Venus transit, and certain just how that might manifest for different signs and different rising signs and stuff like that. So the retrograde motion, as most of you probably know, is when a planet, it doesn't go backwards, but it slows down in comparison to the rest of the planets. So it ends up kind of going backwards in a sense, although that's not technically what it's doing. But it'll move, instead of moving forward through the sign, it'll move backwards through the sign. So it kind of throws off the energy of the planet and the sign and everything, and can create chaos. I always say that the personal planets, being Mercury, Venus, and Mars, when they go retrograde, it's much more of an upset to our lives than when the bigger planets go retrograde, because it's just a completely different energy. So the ones that you have to worry about, I guess you should say, would be Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So happens about once every year and a half, I believe, that Venus goes retrograde. And right now it's happening in the sign of Gemini. Last time it was in Scorpio, which was in the fall of 2018. So in general, if you have Venus retrograde in your natal chart, I have it. I actually only know, I think, 2 other people who have it, but it is not incredibly rare. Like I said, it happens every year and a half. So calculate how many times that would be since you've been born. Anyway, and so people who have it in their natal chart, your relationship style, your relationships are going to be very different from the rest of your peers, and you don't necessarily go about relationships in a typical way. And a lot of times Venus retrograde people can have trouble in relationships because you just don't go about it in the same way that everybody else does. So people who don't have it kind of expect you to go a certain way, and you don't. A lot of times people with Venus in retrograde can find love later in life after plenty of failed relationships. And they also have a way of sort of reflecting on past relationships, not in a nostalgic way, more just sort of looking back to see what happened and stuff like that. And they're just unconventional lovers, and therefore there can be issues. But you're also very unique lovers, and the kind of people that you're not likely to forget. And like I said, most of the time people with Venus retrograde later in life have really successful relationships because they've learned a lot, they've grown a lot. The retrograde position is basically just to teach you something. It's kind of a sort of karma, I guess you'd say, to teach you how to love and how to love yourself. The other thing that can happen with Venus retrograde people is issues with friendships, female friendships in particular. And yeah, there's a lesson that you have to learn through the extent of your life, and once you learn those lessons, you will likely have a good relationship, but you'll have to go through things that maybe other people don't. Okay, so jumping into what it means now with Venus in retrograde. So by the way, if you have Venus in retrograde natally, the retrograde transit, I'm not going to say it doesn't affect you. It does, but you almost get more positive things out of it. It's almost like the rest of the world is experiencing what you experience on a daily basis. So you're like, oh, I'm good. I've been dealing with this my whole life. Bring it on. Let's go. And you're a little bit more, just laid back about the whole thing. And everyone else is like, oh my God, everything's falling apart. And you're like, yeah, welcome to my life. So that's basically how you experience it. It doesn't mean you aren't affected, but you're just not affected in the same way other people are. Okay, so right now it's retrograde in Gemini, which, Venus in Gemini already is kind of a volatile placement. And the other thing that's happening is it's in square with Neptune pretty much for the whole time. It goes from now until June 25th. So the square with Neptune can, make things much more difficult to decipher, when it comes to basically having relationship issues. There might be a lot of things that are lurking under the surface that you don't necessarily know how to address. There can be romantic idealizations that come forth, or romantic illusions where you think you know someone and you don't, or you find some type of secret. And I don't want to say this is like necessarily going to be like infidelity or anything like that. Just maybe, things are just more vague, and not everything is what it seems. And you're more likely to sort of fall into these illusions and a illusory way of thinking about your relationships. Loving someone who's not available, or looking back on a certain relationship with rose-colored glasses, even though it was not a good one, or stuff like that. And with the retrograde always comes like, the return of your exes, and you'll get text, especially since it's in Gemini. It's just a very communicative sign, especially through written verbalization. So definitely a lot of texts will come, phone calls, stuff like that, especially with what we're all going through right now, being, having to stay at home and stuff like that. Like, people are going to be reaching out via the internet. And, it could be a situation where you find out your spouse or significant other is texting their ex, or they find out you've been texting your ex, or, stuff like that. And, a lot of people can break up during the retrograde season. But the thing is, if you do break up during retrograde, it's probably for the better, or it's probably a relationship that wasn't as solid as you maybe thought it was. Whereas if you're strong, you're tight, you've been together for a long time, you've already probably been through a couple of Venus retrogrades, you're good. Or in general, if you're just with someone that you're meant to be with. But it basically brings all of these kind of problems to the surface. So it doesn't mean that they're not there. It doesn't mean they're not real. You're just more aware of them. And people are wanting to shake up their relationships more, lashing out, doing things they wouldn't normally do with the retrograde, and just kind of wanting to, go back and forth. And especially with the energy being Gemini, there's a lot of indecision. There's a lot of, I love you, I hate you, and kind of also like, I want to be with you, I don't want to be with you. The other thing is maybe having two people that you are trying to decide between, or two things, like, a person or a career, or just whatever is happening. There might be a sort of back and forth flip-flop between two ideas or ideals of what you want, or what you're trying to decide whether you want. So I feel, okay, so there's certain signs that will be more affected, and this would be, I'm going to say Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mars. So if you have your Sun, your Moon, your Venus, or your Mars in Gemini, and it's important to look at the degrees. If you're an early Gemini placement of any of these placements, like if you're born in May and you're a Gemini, this might not actually apply to you as much. Or, look at the degrees of your moon and all that stuff. But on a general level, Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mars, Gemini, there's going to be a conjunction happening with Venus. So these issues might be at more of the forefront of your life and your situation. So, people with Gemini Sun, like June Geminis, they might be really feeling that Venus retrograde in where it's like happening in your life, and it's very prevalent. People with Gemini Moon are maybe feeling things on a more internal level, like all of this turmoil that I talked about regarding relationships and love and stuff like that might be happening to you on an internal level, where you're trying to figure out your own feelings. People with Venus in Gemini might be experiencing it more heavily on just a general relationship level, friendship level, where it's kind of a clash between, or I don't want to say a clash, but just intensity between what's happening in your love life, what you want in your love life, who you are as a lover, stuff like that. And then people with Mars in Gemini, Venus is conjunct, so they might be feeling more aggressive with their relationships. Maybe more arguments will ensue between you and your significant other or your friend. And then we have the trines, which would be Libra placements, Aquarius placements, like I said, Sun, Moon, Venus, and Mars. This isn't to say you're not going to be affected or like everything's going to be great, and again, look at the degrees. It's going to be later, mid or later degrees. But you'll maybe sort of benefit in the end from whatever's happening. If you have a Libra or Aquarius, Sun, Moon, Venus, or Mars, you might, whatever's happening with Venus for you might actually end up being a good thing, or end up finding some light at the end of the tunnel, or finding some type of positive manifestation of what's happening. And then we have the opposition, which is Sag, so Sun, Moon, Venus, or Mars in Sag, later degree, and then the squares, which would be Virgo or Pisces. So these people are probably going to be the ones that struggle more, along with Gemini placements, especially the Virgo and the Pisces, just with more like things happening that you don't want to happen, that you feel like are going against you, like maybe feeling like whatever's happening is really, you're maybe struggling with it more, or it's just going against you, especially with the Neptune square being in Pisces. You just might be affected on a more uncomfortable level where you're like struggling with it, wrestling with it, and not super happy with how things are turning out. But tension, even though tension can typically be bad or negative, sometimes is good because it helps bring out feelings, it helps bring out things that you maybe haven't been wanting to deal with, especially with Virgo and Pisces, the ultimate not wanting to deal with things sometimes. So I'd say more the internalized ones like Moon. So that can be difficult for them. And then a few rising signs I'm going to point out that might be having more of a impact. So Gemini rising, of course, this is going to be happening in your house of self. So, whatever is the direction of your life might be sort of flipped on its head. Like, okay, I thought I was going in this direction in my love life, and now I'm not, and what do I do? The other thing, this can manifest in your identity, like, this is not the time to get haircuts, this is not the time to do a beauty makeover, this is not the time to, try to really change yourself in any type of physical way. Okay, Aries rising might be more affected in the way that this is happening in your third house, which would be texting, communicating, stuff like that. So Aries rising people might be dealing with that side of the Gemini retrograde, like doing the whole, X text, or, just having more of the issues regarding social media, regarding communication, regarding verbalizations of things. Aquarius rising, this is going to happen in the 5th house, so there might be more issues in general with your romantic life. It might feel more, there could be some more of the romantic side of Venus retrograde, because like I said, it could be with friendships, it could even be with money sometimes, which that would be Taurus rising might have some money issues during this time. But more condensed in that 5th house would be romantic stuff, so Aquarius rising might be dealing with that more. Sag rising, that's in the 7th house of relationships, so there could definitely be a rupture, there could be a breakup, there could be taking a break from a friend, or just sort of feeling like you want to set out on your own and be independent, and you don't want to be in a partnership anymore. That could very well happen. And then Virgo rising, this will be happening in your 10th house, so whatever's going on in your love life might be made public, and you might have to deal with a sort of public fiasco of your relationship issues. So just be careful with that. Like, whatever you put out into the public setting, know that it could have some type of backlash on you, especially with the square to Virgo as well. And then Cancer rising, this is happening in your 12th house, so this can indicate an ending. You might be feeling like, okay, this is really the time to end something, and you might experience a breakup for that reason. But those are just some potential manifestations, and please reach out to me if you want me to give you a more specific reading regarding that, because it all depends on degrees, so I can't really make too many generalizations. But that's what I have to say about Venus retrograde, and thank you so much for watching.